In 1800, a 28-year-old factory owner in Scotland did something that made the entire British industrial establishment think he had lost his mind. He banned child labor. He cut working hours. He built a school. He renovated his workers' housing. He opened a shop that sold food at cost price with no profit. Then he made more money than almost any mill owner in Britain. His name was Robert Owen. His investors told him he was throwing money away. Heads of state traveled from across Europe to see what he had built. Karl Marx studied him. The cooperative movement traces its origins directly to him. The educational principles he demonstrated in a Scottish mill town in 1816 are standard practice in schools across the world today. He was not a politician. He was not a philosopher by training. He was a factory owner who looked at the conditions around him, reached a conclusion that the entire industrial world had missed, and spent the rest of his life proving it with evidence. This is his story. Robert Owen was born on the 14th of May, 1771, in Newtown, Montgomeryshire, Wales, sixth of 7 children. His father was a saddler and the local postmaster. There was no family fortune waiting for Owen, no inheritance, no connections. At 10 years old, he left school and left home, moving alone to Stamford, Lincolnshire, to apprentice at a drapery shop. He moved to London next, then to Manchester, each city pulling him deeper into the engine room of the new industrial economy. By 18, he had borrowed £100 from his older brother and started his own business manufacturing spinning mules, the machines that turned raw cotton into yarn. At 19, he was managing a cotton mill of 500 workers. By 28, Robert Owen was one of the most powerful mill owners in Britain. In 1799, he married Caroline Dale, daughter of David Dale, owner of the new Lanark cotton mills in Lanarkshire, Scotland. The following year, Owen became managing partner. He had wealth, influence, and a mill of 2,000 workers on the banks of the River Clyde. What he found there was not what he expected, and it set the course of the rest of his life. Around 500 of New Lanark's 2,000 workers were children, taken directly from orphanages in Edinburgh and Glasgow. The housing was falling apart, theft was rampant, drunkenness was rampant. Owen's own father-in-law, David Dale, had been considered one of the more humane employers of the era. This was what humane looked like. Owen walked those floors and watched, and he did not see what other factory owners saw. They saw a workforce that was lazy and morally broken. Owen saw people who had been given nothing, no education, no decent housing, no stability, no reason to behave any differently than they did. He had read the philosopher John Locke, who argued that the human mind at birth is a blank slate shaped entirely by experience and circumstance. He had studied Claude Helvétius, the French thinker who wrote in 1758 that environment is the sole determinant of human character. Owen took these ideas off the page and pressed them against everything he observed at New Lanark every day. His conclusion became the foundation of his entire life's work. As he wrote in 1813, in his landmark text, A New View of Society, man's character is made for him, and not by him. If character is formed by circumstance, then poverty is not a moral failure. It is a design failure. Change the design. Change the outcome. He was not the first person to think this. He was the first person with a factory, a workforce, and a balance sheet to prove it. Owen started with the housing. Workers' tenements were renovated and maintained at a time when most industrial towns in Britain were open sewers. Then he turned to child labor. When Owen arrived at New Lanark, there was no legal minimum working age for cotton mills. He refused to employ any child under 10 anyway, and directed younger children to his school instead. In 1816, Owen opened the Institution for the Formation of Character, one of the first purpose-built community education centers in Britain. It took children from the age of 3. There was no corporal punishment, none. At a time when beating children was considered not just acceptable, but necessary, Owen banned it outright. Teachers used pictures, natural objects, music, and movement rather than rote memorization and the cane. Adults attended evening classes. A company store sold goods at cost price with no profit markup. The working day was cut to 10 hours, against the industry standard of 12 to 14. His business partners fought him at every step. Owen bought out the dissenters and brought in new investors who would let him work, including the philosopher Jeremy Bentham. And then the results arrived. New Lanark turned a profit, consistent and substantial. Productivity climbed. Crime within the community fell sharply. 20,000 visitors came between 1815 and 1825. Politicians, philosophers, and heads of state. Among them, the Grand Duke Nicholas of Russia, the man who would become Tsar Nicholas I. New Lanark had proved the thesis on a small scale. Owen wanted a much larger canvas. In 1817, 2 years after the end of the Napoleonic Wars, mass unemployment was still spreading through Britain. Owen submitted a formal report to the Parliamentary Committee for the relief of the manufacturing poor. He was not asking for soup kitchens or workhouses. He was proposing communities built from scratch on cooperative principles, which he called villages of cooperation. The plans were precise, between 800 and 1,200 people, arranged in a large square, private family apartments along the inner edges, communal dining halls, a school, a library, a lecture room at the center, agricultural land and manufacturing surrounding everything, no employers, no servants. Residents would collectively perform every task the community needed and share the profits equally. The British government listened and did nothing, so Owen crossed the Atlantic. In 1825, he purchased 20,000 acres of land in Posey County, Indiana, from a German religious community called the Harmonists for $150,000. He renamed it New Harmony. Before the experiment had even begun, he addressed the United States Congress. In a speech attended by the outgoing President James Monroe, the incoming President John Quincy Adams, and 3 former presidents, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison. New Harmony opened the first kindergarten in the United States, one of the first free non-sectarian public schools in the country, and the first free public library in Indiana. It collapsed within 2 years. The settlers could not agree on governance, on authority, on the rules of collective decision-making. Owen returned to Britain in 1828, having spent roughly £40,000 of his personal fortune. New Harmony was over, but the ideas it carried did not die with it. Owen came back to Britain with almost no money and no intention of stopping. In 1833, he helped organize the Grand National Consolidated Trades Union, one of the first attempts at a single national union body in British history, which reached 500,000 members at its peak before collapsing under government pressure within months. It failed. But the labor movement that grew from that soil over the following century transformed the working conditions of hundreds of millions of people. The cooperative movement grew differently, quietly, town by town. A group of weavers in Rochdale, Lancashire, shaped directly by Owen's writings, established the Rochdale Society of Equitable Pioneers in 1844. The principles they codified, democratic member control, open membership, shared profits, remain the legal foundation of cooperative enterprise in most countries today. The International Cooperative Alliance, founded in 1895, now represents over 3 million cooperative enterprises across 109 countries, with approximately 1 billion members. His educational principles, early childhood schooling, child-centered learning, no physical punishment, were not adopted as mainstream British policy until a full century after he had demonstrated them at New Lanark. His argument that environment shapes character is now embedded across public health policy, developmental psychology, and criminology. Academics call it social determinism. It is no longer considered radical. It is considered established science. Robert Owen died on the 17th of November, 1858, in Newtown, Wales, the same town he had left at 10 years old with nothing. Robert Owen failed more than once, lost most of his fortune, watched communities he built dissolve into argument. He kept going anyway. But the ideas he had spent his life testing did not stay in Scotland or Indiana. They traveled. Friedrich Engels studied Owen directly and named him in 1880 as one of the 3 founding minds of socialist thought. Karl Marx and Engels had already referenced him in the Communist Manifesto in 1848, 11 years before Owen died. Owen's central argument that material conditions shape human character and behavior became one of the foundational pillars of Marxist theory and the intellectual bedrock of communist philosophy. Robert Owen did not build communism, but the men who did build it on ground he had already broken. He was not the end of the story. He was the beginning of it.